Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Writers Chat. We're so glad you're with us, whether you're here right now as we're recording or watching the replay. I am Johnny Alexander. I'm joined by my co-host, Norma Poor and Brandy Bro, and I am really excited now to have Brandy introduce our very special guest.
We have Chip MacGregor with us today.
Oh.
He is going to be talking about being a writer that editors, agents, and publishers love to work with. So basically, we're going to be kind of talking about etiquette, behavior, those kinds of things that can be fantastic and sometimes get us into trouble when we don't want it to. But let me tell you first a little bit about Chip. So Chip MacGregor is the president of McGregor and Liedeke and former publisher with the Time Warner Book Group and Hachette. He's handled more than 1,000 book contracts and represented titles on nearly every bestseller list, including hitting #1 with the New York Times and USA Today. When he was in the first grade, he hurried home one day and told his Scottish immigrant mother, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a book guy." After 4 decades in the business, he's managed to do exactly that. Chip, I'm so glad that you've been able to come with us today and just kind of have a fun little chat and talk about this thing called etiquette and behavior.
Yes.
I had this brilliant idea that, maybe we would do a skit or something of how to be a good writer with your behavior and how to not be a good writer, but then I decided that maybe my brilliance wasn't so brilliant. We're just gonna have some great questions. So I have kind of like a little topical thing. I kind of like you to maybe talk a little bit about what to maybe do and don't do kind of overall, and some different facets, like when you're querying or submitting.
Yeah.
And then maybe at a conference or when you're rejected and those kinds of things. So we have some general, ideas of, follow guidelines and all that stuff. But what are some overall do's and don't do's when you are approaching an editor, an agent, or a publisher with your work?
Sure, happy to talk about that, and thanks for having me. It's nice to see you all.
Yeah.
I'm I've been going through a transition here. I have 25 years of agenting, and now I'm at a place where I have been. I'm moving towards retirement. I've been trimming my list down to just a couple of people, and have been consulting. Something I've really wanted to do. There's a couple of ministries I've wanted to consult with. I've really wanted to help ministries that are trying to get resources into Black churches, predominantly Black churches, who tend to be under-resourced because so many of the resources basically are, written by white evangelicals who don't necessarily speak the language. It's not there, it's not as culturally relevant. So I've wanted to do that. I wanted to work with people who are trying to get discipling materials into third world countries and stuff, other under-resourced part of the church. So I've been doing that, and I've been consulting with, and I've taken a part-time role with Whitaker House Publishing, just helping them on a couple of things, contracts and things like that, that some of you have probably heard me talk about at writing conferences. So I'm in a little bit of a different phase. I'm sort of learning to be 65 and make changes, And but this is actually a topic. I meant to have this out here. Sorry. This is actually a topic near and dear to my heart, because my wife and I wrote a couple of books together. I used to have a blog, and the blog, several times was listed on the 101 best blogs for writers that Writer's Digest did and everything, and it was really popular. And I used to handle this question. So Holly and I put together something called "How Can I Find a Literary Agent?" and 101 Other Questions Asked by Writers, and then we did a book called Step-by-Step Pitches and Proposals, a workbook for writers. And I know some of you have seen this, some of you have bought it. It's still available both in print and digital on on Amazon. That's the only commercial you're going to get. The reason I point that out is because we do talk about this topic in here, and like in step-by-step pitches and proposals, there's 100 books, probably more, on how to create a book proposal. And the only thing that's different about this one that I think is unique is I used actual pitch letters that I'd used to sell books. I used actual proposals from proposals that I had sold to publishers. And I got permission from the writers to do that. There were a couple of times I had to change names, but I got permission from everybody. And the reason we did that was I wanted to see people. I wanted to make sure that people saw not just the idea of what should a proposal be like, what should a pitch letter be like, but an actual one that worked and sold the book, And so, so people, people who know me know that I loved going to conferences, haven't been conferences now for a while. Just got burned out on them, but loved going to conferences and loved talking to people about their books. And there were a couple of things that I think it's good to be reminded of, even though a lot of it is common sense. The notion of and these are, to be honest, these are in no particular order, but having some kind of writing sample with you is important. And the reason is because ultimately, now, the editor is going to want to know that you can actually write. So having something there, even if it says, and I used to tell people all the time, even if it says, don't bring a proposal because we won't be taking them, we'll only be giving out names and emails. Yeah, I always tell people, ignore that advice. You need to have something there because this business, sometimes it's serendipitous. So what if
True. Yeah.
I'm walking in, I meet with this editor. It's really somebody who, maybe it's somebody who I've wanted to talk to for a long time. Maybe it's somebody I've never heard of before. And we just start talking. And I tell them about my idea. And they're like, oh, Chip, that is brilliant. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, here. Great. And the funny thing is, even if they tell you, oh, please don't, I don't know that I've ever, well, I know that I've never turned down something. When I was speaking at a conference, I've never had a situation where something really sounded good and they said to me, oh, can I show you something? And I was like, oh no, please no. I don't want to see it. Come on, that's what we're there for, is to try. So that would be one thing. Another thing is the first time you talk, hello, everyone who's joining us, just got out of bed. The first time you tell about your book idea should not be when you're speaking to me. Shouldn't be when you're speaking to an editor or an agent. You should know what you're going to say. You should actually practice it. You should practice it out loud. This is an interesting thing. My wife and I, we didn't know each other at the time we went to college, but we both went to college on speech scholarships. True story. So we both competed in speech, and so we understand the importance of preparation, because you think your story, but getting Mr. Tongue and Mr. Lip to actually say it together, it just comes out different. The words are different in our head than they are, and you know what that's like because you're writing, and it's like, it's different on the page than it was in my mind. So you should practice. You should know what you're going to say. And I would always tell people, you're going to want two versions of it. You're going to want the very short, what we call an elevator pitch, the very short, here's what it is. And it makes sure to give us the genre and the major plot points. It tells us something about it. And then if they show interest, you should have a little bit more, something that talks more about, maybe you talk about the characters, who they are, maybe the setting, if that's important. If you want to tell me that it's an Amish, or it's Amish people in space or whatever. And you want to be able to say something about the significance of the story. So if you can be aware of how you sound, so that you this is a business meeting. And you know how it is when sometimes you've all been to writers' conferences, I assume. You know how it is. Sometimes you'll sit down and there are some people and you just want to know like their name and where they're from. But their first response is, I'm a sci-fi writer and I've got this story about the planet Zorgon, and you're like, okay, great. So the notion of your tone of voice and your professional behavior toward them, I don't mind being pitched. This is one of the things that I used to say to people all the time. I don't mind being pitched, but I always wanted it to be a professional pitch. I always wanted the person who was approaching me was acting as though they were in a business meeting. And that meant sort of their approach to me, I'd always try and smile and always stood up, always shook hands with people and stuff like that. How they were dressed. I think it matters maybe more to you than it does to the person you're pitching because it feels professional.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's a generational thing. I know that from a different generation where professional dress was really important. And I know it's far less important now to younger generations. But I still think that, but you're still trying to make an impression. It's an interesting thing. I mean, I know that a lot of people who are in the fantasy sci-fi sort of realm, cosplay has become a big deal to them. It's fine with me if they want to do that. I have because they would consider, well, that's professional because I'm introducing you to sort of the world that I'm creating. But do you know, I have never I've never met an editor that it mattered to them that somebody came in costume. It was like, okay, yeah, I'm not buying it because you got a great costume, And so the fact is, I think that's fine. I think the notion of looking and sounding and acting professional at a pitch, it's just important. And the reason is because ultimately this is a business. I realize it's an art for you. And I get that it's an art for you. But ultimately, it still comes down to this is a business. And people want, and the people you're talking to, they want you to treat it as such. So, okay. Is that, Brady, that may be too long of an answer. I will try and.
No. That's great.
That's
well,
great.
I'm kind of wondering, though, on this side of, what are some of the shocking things that writers have said or done to try and get you to look at their work or accept their book?
This has been told 10,000 times at writers' conferences, but it's a true story. I am the guy. I'm at San Diego. I walk into the men's room. I'm standing at the urinal. This is a true story, ladies.
Oh boy.
Ask someone else about what you were standing at the urinal, and I was. I'm standing at the urinal, and there. It's true. There really is a guy who comes and stands. He had been talking to me outside and walked with me all the way to the men's room door, and I'm trying to get away from him because he's weird, And I was like, "Oh, geez, come on!" I go in. I'm standing at the urinal, and all of a sudden, I get So I just wondered if you'd like to look at and he slides it. He stands there and he slides it in front of my face. That is a true story.
Oh man.
He slides his manuscript as standing there doing my business. And I yelled at him. I actually said, "Not now."
Yeah, right.
If I'd really had a sense of humor, I would have said, "Not now." But,
yeah.
No, that's a great story.
Yeah, that is not the way to endear somebody.
No, I just but I've heard that retold different ways. It's a woman agent, they're sliding it under the door and everything.
And you're not alone, because I've heard other agents and editors say, women have said the same thing. They have people slide stuff underneath the stall to them when they're in there. They're like, just leave me alone. I'm in the bathroom. Have some decency.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that happens frequently is, again, now I'm an extrovert, so I like people, and so I like being at the events. And so when I would go to writers' conferences, the social events I always went to, when there's a dinner, people standing around, everything like that, and and I like that. And I don't mind people then talking to me, in a sense, pitching me and everything, because I know that that's why we both came. I came to meet authors and see if I can help or see if there's anybody I want to represent. They came to see if there's an agent or an editor who's around, which, so that part was always fine with me. But, if we're standing at dinner, and I'm in the suit or I'm in my kilt, if it's a fancy dinner,
Yes.
and you come over to me, it's like, say hello. Don't just start in with the pitch. That notion of, uh, because what people forget sometimes, this business is so relational. This is so relational. All of us do business with people we like and are comfortable with. Now, sometimes you work for a company, you're forced to do business with people you're uncomfortable with, but for the most part, all of us do business. And certainly when we're starting up, we do business with people we like and are comfortable with. So I think that's one of the things, is making sure that that when you approach somebody, yeah, you're greeting them. It's nice to see you. It's nice that you're here. You say something about who you are, where you're from, blah blah blah, and then you can talk about what you write. And I would say being aware of the person. Everybody's different. I used to go to conferences and I'd listen to pitches all day long, and that doesn't make me a saint or anything. It's just that's my style. I'd rather be there, be working, and be listening to stuff like that. And I could always handle a big volume of stuff. Some agents are not that way.
Yeah.
They get more emotionally invested. See, as soon as, if I'm talking to Norma over here and she gets up and I say goodbye and she turns and walks away, and then, I turn and Sally's walking towards me. Norma was gone. I'm talking to Sally now. You know what I mean? But not everybody is that way. And so you have to be aware that there are some, I'm thinking of some agents, I won't say their names, but I'm thinking of some agents that they are worn out. They're like exhausted emotionally, probably because they're more introverted. Whereas people energize me, people wear some other people out. And yes, he's talking to Sally.
We love Sally.
And so you have to be aware that, if you start talking to them and they immediately, the body language is, oh, please stay away. You've got to be respectful of that. You really do. And there were times where something was happening. I am sorry. I can't listen right now. My cell phone is going off. Oh, I was at a conference one time. My daughter texted me to say that she's going to the hospital. Well, at the time, the difference between dealing with that or talking to Ben, about his, his Amish romance. Look, that was an easy call to make, and I would try and say to people, "I'm sorry, I've got something else." But the fact is, I'd always tell them, look, try and get back with me later. Again, most people who you have to understand that most people who are coming to this from the agent or author, or sorry, from the agent or the publisher side, they want to talk to you. That's why they're there. They want to talk to you. So again, I was the guy who said I was going to give shorter answers. So that's
no, that's great. I'm glad that you have answers with depth. I'd like to talk a little bit about behavior after something is accepted, or you join with a writer as their agent, because there's certain conduct to do and not do. And I know that on the writer side, a lot of writers have been like, well, I'm concerned about this, but I don't know if it's okay to ask the editor or ask the agent because I don't want to bother them. And
right.
And then there's the simple fact that some writers are high maintenance.
Yes, that's true.
And so can you talk a little bit about what makes a writer high maintenance and what makes them, what's the difference so that we don't be a high maintenance writer?
So I want to make sure that you understand that you have to think about, you come, you meet with an agent, and she likes your work and you start talking and everything like that. And it's a series of steps, where you're getting to know each other, you're seeing if they really like your work, you're seeing if you're comfortable with them, because you want to get the right agent and not just any agent. And there are, especially if you're working on, well, there's a bunch of crappy agents out there. Nobody really ever says that, but it's true. There are good agents. There are great agents. There are good. There's okay agents, and there's really bad agents, and there are people who don't know what they're doing. And editors the same way. I will say that there's more of a there's probably more of a vetting process with editors. Editors being hired by a company and they're doing some kind of vetting to make sure that this person really knows what they're doing. Whereas, anybody can claim online, oh, I'm an agent, and I'm constantly seeing that. I'm seeing people, and it's funny, there have been times, some of you have known this because you've heard me say this before in other venues. I mean, I've been on panels sometimes where there's panelists, 4 or 5 agents, or if you go to one of Marlene's conferences, there's like 37 agents sitting. You all have time to introduce yourself and say where you're from. Oh, look, the hour's gone. And so you have to think about the relationship that you have with an agent as like your friendship. So
Yeah.
You meet somebody, and the first time you meet them, you're probably not, oh, we're going to be best friends and we're going to go places together and we're going to hang out. That's just, you know what I mean? You meet them, and there's that season of trying to figure out who we are and how we fit. And the thing to keep in mind is there's not like one agent-author relationship. There's not. So, I worked with Davis Bond for years and years.
Yeah.
So Davis, if you don't know, a longtime writer in residence at Oxford University, and has, I don't know, he's done probably close to 60 books, and has used to live on the bestseller list. And Davis wants to talk through ideas, book ideas. So he will say, hey, I've got this setting and we're trying to figure out what will happen. And I will send him several ideas. I might send him 5 different books, and we'll talk through some of them and we'll see what fits in this story. And he's going to take and run with those. And maybe he used something I gave him, and maybe it morphs into something else. But early on, we talk through that process. I've represented a lot of thriller writers over the year. Now, that's a strength of mine. And so talking through ideas is something that I like to do. Now, I used to represent Brennan Manning. Brennan Manning, if you don't know, is on the nonfiction side, a former priest who fell in love and married a Catholic nun. And it turns out, if you didn't know, that the Catholic Church is kind of down on that idea. And but he was a brilliant thinker and writer, and he wrote the Ragamuffin Gospel, which was just just a fantastic spirituality book. And Brennan never cared about my ideas. Okay. Brennan did not want to talk to me and hear what I had to say about his ideas. And I could stick with just fiction if you want, but I'm just saying that so my relationship with Davis was different from my relationship with Brennan. Also, Davis and I are roughly the same age. But I worked with some authors who were considerably younger than me. And so the relationship was going to be different. And as I got older, there were times that in some ways I felt like I was kind of like the dad or the uncle, to some of them, where it was, I don't want to say that I was like giving life advice, but I was giving life advice. But so my point is just that the relationship is different with different people, just like it is in your life, you know? And also what you need, what I'm going to pick on somebody else. What Leslie needs is probably different from what Lindy needs. So some people need they really need me to talk with them about the idea, and some people don't need it. Some people really need me to read, some of the work and respond to it and really dig into it. And some people are sensitive and they don't, I mean, they want me to read it. I'm not sending anything out that I haven't read, but they don't want to interact that much. They don't want close editing to it and everything. Some people want to talk to me about marketing, and some people, they got marketing down. It's so funny. I mean, we talk about, it's been said at a lot of writing conferences that conferences used to all be about craft. And now they're all about marketing. They're all about marketing, advertising, PR, publicity, all that kind of stuff. And there has been a significant shift in there. That's what Amazon has done to us. But it's interesting, for all that talk about marketing, I represent a couple of people. Sheila Gregoire on the nonfiction side. Sheila is a marketing machine. She does not need me to come in and evaluate her marketing and talk with her or her team about this is how to do effective marketing on this. People are going to her and hiring her to get marketing training. You know what I mean? So again, you have to, every relationship is different. So here's a couple of things that I would suggest to you. Where are you strong? Where are you weak? Where do you really want help? Where do you want to make sure that you really don't want to hear from them on this stuff? Also, part of it with Christian writers is the notion of theology. How important is it to you to find somebody who basically shares some theological pillars with you? So I'm a longtime Anglican. I was raised Presbyterian, longtime Anglican. But I'm not an evangelical. And so when it comes to so it's just different. Christian publishing dominated by evangelicals, Christian book sales dominated by evangelicals and charismatics. I'm not a charismatic, but I, been around it enough I can speak the language. And so I needed to make sure when I was working with somebody that they were comfortable with where I was, and I was comfortable with where they were. And again, that's what a friendship is like. I do worry that Trump and Biden supporters have forgotten that we can get along even if we disagree on who we're going to vote for. The current violence is very bothersome, and the current rhetoric is very bothersome. But the fact is, this is something. That's what friendships are like. You don't have to get along on every point. And so that's my point is just, when you're thinking about this, think of this as a friendship. Think of it as being long-term. Think about of what you need most. Understand that there are some authors, what they really need most from an agent is basically editorial help, or they need story help, or they need marketing help. They need to find an agent who's really going to help with marketing. Other authors, pretty strong on story and on writing and everything like that. I mean, they want somebody else to have a second look at it, but they're pretty strong on that. They really need help on the contract side because they don't know anything about contracts. And the publisher is your business partner, but they're not your friend. And the publisher is not there to make sure that you get the best deal possible. I mean, that's, the reason there's a contract is that the publisher is there to stay in business and make as much money as possible. And so if you don't know anything about contracts, you probably need an agent who's pretty strong in contracts. Remember when I said something about there's a bunch of crappy agents out there?
Yeah.
That's where you see them, I guess, is with the contracts, especially. It can
the contracts, and then and if they can't, and if they're not good at editing or on the story side and everything like that, if you need that's the wrong agent for you.
Right.
Another thing, and the thing I always prided myself in is working with authors that over time their career grew. Now, there's no guarantee with that, and I sometimes had authors whose careers, did not. But for the most part, that was pretty much the trajectory of the careers of the people I was working with. And the reason, again, background in organizational theory, and when I was working on my PhD at the University of Oregon, I was working in their career planning and placement office, and I was put there specifically to help them figure out how to do artist management. The University of Oregon at the time had people who were getting MFA, Master of Fine Arts, in all kinds of arts. You can get it in dance, you get it in theater, you get it in playwriting, you get it in music performance, you can get it in music composition, you could get it in poetry, you can get it in creative writing, you can get it in nonfiction. So they had all these people getting degrees and absolutely no career planning modules for them. But the university had a career planning and placement office that was really strong in helping people in accounting and helping, so they had, in certain things they were great. Nothing for the arts. And so, and again, this is so long ago, it was like during the Coolidge administration. But nevertheless, that's what I was tasked with. I had a graduate teaching fellowship. I was working my PhD, and so that's what I did, and that's what I spent 2 years doing, is putting together a system. So that's how did I launch from that? And I was working in publishing at the time, and I launched into that and becoming an agent. Well, it was easy for me because I was going to focus on career planning. If that is something that you really need, you need to seek out an agent who can help you in that realm. And again, I think that different agents, different strengths, So
I'll just say that, like, oh my gosh, back in 2007, 2008, 2009 at the Florida Christian Writers Conference, you gave this template for career planning. And I didn't have an agent when I first got that from you, but for years after, I would, like, every year just go through that again to see where I was, how things were going and all that kind of thing. So, I was a beneficiary of all this education that you had, that you shared with others, just to kind of keep on track. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you is, as you're evaluating who to take on, and you've looked at somebody and the writing is good and da 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 da, but what might be some red flags that you'd say, if not for maybe that personality trait or that little quirk or that little something, it's going to be a pass, even though
that is funny. It
there's
took me years.
potential.
I used to get that question quite a bit, Johnny, and it took me years
Really?
and it took me years to figure out, what is it? I didn't have a good answer for it. Over time, I did figure it out. There were two things that were red flags for me, and they may not be for somebody else.
Okay.
Now, for me, just so that you know, for me, one of them was people who wanted to over spiritualize everything. So that it was, Chip, here's my title. Now, we can't change the title because God gave it to me in a dream. And I'd be like, huh?
Okay.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Because really, the issue for me is, but what if the title sucks?
Yeah.
So that was one thing. Is it there were people who wanted to over spiritualize stuff.
Yeah.
And that became a red flag for me, where I just realized because ultimately what I think, they might be very sincere. So I'm not poking fun at their spirituality. I'm just saying that they might be very sincere, but ultimately it felt to me like what they really didn't want, they didn't want to listen. And this is a tough business. If you don't want to listen, this is a tough business. This is a business where you're trying to improve. The reason you're here, you're trying to learn to improve. The reason you go to a conference, the reason you hang out with other writers, partly you enjoy because they're in something similar to you, but you'd like to learn from them. You'd like to pick their brain. You'd like to hear them say something. You'd like to see how somebody else does your job and does a good job at it. And you're like, oh, yeah, I could do that. And so, and ultimately, I really struggled with that. There were times people would ask me just the flat out question, what should I do about this? And I would look at it and I'd say, okay, try this, and I'd give them a suggestion. No, I'm not going to do that. Well, you asked,
Yeah.
That's me. You want my opinion. That was my opinion. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was one thing for me. Another thing for me that I learned was, while I like people and I enjoy, and I spent my life on email and everything like that, the 14 email per day person, that would end up being a short relationship for me. And I don't mind 14 questions. Put them all in one email, and I'll get to it, and then have the patience to understand that I'm not a machine where you press the button and the answer barfs out. Sometimes I need to think on things for a little while. But what drove me crazy was I'm doing emails, ding, oh, it's who have I not picked on yet? Oh, it's Rachel, and then I'm typing on, ding, oh, it's Rachel again. Oh, gosh, it's Rachel again, ding, ding, ding after, and that got to me because the neediness of it was like, no, and probably it was probably also the disorganization. Look, if you're organized, you could think through how to put this into a single email or something. So those, for me, those were a couple of things. For different people, it's going to be different things. I have a friend who's an agent, and she guards her privacy. She does not want anybody asking about her life. Now, you can ask me anything about my life, but I'm happy to talk about my kids, happy to talk about my job, happy to talk about my work history, happy to talk about what I'm strong and weak at, happy to talk about my educational stuff, happy to talk about what I'm reading, any personal stuff, but not everybody's the same again. And it was, she did not want to talk about, and there's not a problem, but I'm just saying, in her life, she didn't want to talk about her marriage, what her husband did. She didn't want to talk about her kids or anything. And it was just different. She had different sort of, a different personality, where things, that sort of thing, that was over here, and that was not part of publishing. I see somebody put in the chat, you need to understand that editors, agents, and publishers are people too. I would say, yeah, for the most part. So, okay. What else? Let's see.
Norma, I'm wondering if you
are
have
there questions?
any questions.
I wasn't even looking at the chat really. I just said, are there questions on here that I'm supposed to be looking at in the chat?
We'll help you with that. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we cover
I
that.
have a question. I was at the Blue Ridge Conference a few years back, and I approached an agent, or a publisher, I'm sorry, with a pitch for a devotional. And going in, I did the hi, my name is, shook his hand and all that. And we had a little bit of polite conversation. And then he asked the questions that we get asked. Who's your target audience? What's the what do you want people to get out of your devotional? And how many days? And my kids and the people here that know me will understand the rarity of this. I couldn't answer. It was like my tongue swelled up in my mouth and I couldn't answer. And I'm like, he goes, well, 30, 45, 52. I'm like, 52 sounds good. I was so embarrassed. He said, email me something, one of your a couple of devotions, and we'll go from there. And I walked away, and the rest of the conference, I could barely look the guy in the face because I felt that was so unprofessional. I don't know what happened, other than to say maybe that was God's way of keeping me from, he wasn't the right match for me. I don't know. What would you say? How would you advise somebody in that scenario?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't know if I've ever been asked it before, Norma. This is an interesting thing. There have been a handful of times. Now, again, let's see. I'm serious when I say I lost track. I knew that I had done more than 200 writing conferences, and so I really don't know like what the number was, but I'm guessing I was probably speaking at a conference live probably more than 300 times is what I'd guess. And so, and I always took a lot of pitches because I was always comfortable doing that. And so talked to a lot of people. So there have been a handful of times people have come. Now, to be fair, I'm not trying to be sexist in saying this. It was always a woman in this particular case. Came in, started to talk, and then like started to cry or sat down, and they were just sort of overcome with it. And it was like, now my style, I would sit down because you don't want somebody towering over you, especially don't want if you're a woman crying, especially you don't want a man towering over you. Not that I tower over anyone, but if you're seated, it's easier to tower. But I would always sit down, reach over, touch your arm. It's okay. We're just talking here. That's all we're doing, and trying. Because I understand the notion of people getting overcome with the fact that I have dreamed about being a writer. I've dreamed about getting something published. And here I am talking to somebody who could actually help with that. It's not just a neighbor or somebody at church saying, "Oh, you're such a good writer. You should write a book," kind of thing. Here's somebody who could actually, and I get that. I get excited over stuff, and so, and I would basically just say, now, tell me your name again, Norma. Oh, Norma. So tell me something just like about your story or about you. Just give me a fact or two about what it is that you're writing. So I tried to find a way in so we could at least have the conversation, because I knew ultimately anybody who sat down crying was going to walk away feeling really bad about it. And I wanted them to have at least something that they could walk away going, "Hey, all right, I might have blown the opening, but I finally told them about the idea." What was harder for me, so in other words, that I understood. I understand the notion of people getting emotional over their work. You ought to get emotional over it. This is something, that this is funny. I tend not to over spiritualize stuff, but I really do believe this is one of those God-given things that, writers will ask me, what should I write? And I'm always like, you've got to write the story that God gives you. And you've got to write what is it that is in your head. And the reason you're writing a book on this is probably because that's important to you, And so what was harder for me was, okay, picture the scene at a writing conference, and you've got most of the agents there. They want to be nice to people, so they tell everybody who they see, "Oh, just email me something." And the reason they do that is because it's so much easier to say no thanks in an email than face to face. But I always found that unfair.
It is.
And so early in my career, probably the very first year I was agenting, which was 98, I sat there thinking, this is dumb. I'm going to be swamped with emails. Sally's got to leave.
Bye, Sally.
It's been fabulous us connecting again like this, Sally. Anyway, so I started saying to people, if something really didn't fit, I would just say, "Okay, I want to set you up. So I know you're writing sci-fi fantasy. I don't do sci-fi fantasy. The reason is because I don't read sci-fi fantasy. It's never been an interest to me. I'm happy to talk about your idea and does the idea work, or the characters or the setting, or so I'm happy to look at the writing and everything. Just understand this is a perfectly safe conversation because I will offer what I know. I won't say any, if I don't know, I'm not going to, make something up. But I'm not going to have you send it to me because I don't represent that. It's like all the people over the years, it became a running joke at conferences that Chip doesn't represent poetry. And it became a thing because I was always like, I'm not a poet. Poets basically are sensitive people who want the world to know how sensitive they are. So, and I'm not that sensitive, and I'm not deep enough to understand what the metaphor is anyway. And so it's one of those where people would come to me and even with all that being out there, and Chip does not want to see poetry, it would frequently happen. Okay, I want to tell you about my poetry. Oh my God. And then it would usually be something, I know you don't like poetry. I know you don't represent poetry, but I've got an epic poem. Great, because it being longer is going to really. And so that's one thing. And I used to say this to agents all the time. Say no. If it doesn't interest you, say no there so that people aren't counting on it. And it makes your life so much easier. It's emotionally tough sometimes to say no to somebody, but it makes your life easier down the road because then you're not getting swamped with a bunch of things that you have no interest in. And you're just too much of a weenie to say no to it anyway. But that was actually harder for me when I would say no to somebody for a good reason. And sometimes the reason was, yeah, this isn't ready. This isn't ready. Now, again, this has been written up a bunch of times, but I had a analogy that I would use with writers. I would say this, when I sit down to make a cake, there's eggs, there's flour, there's salt, there's sugar, something else. But the cake doesn't make itself. I've got to combine all the ingredients. I've got to work at it.
Yep.
And then I pop it in the oven, So here's the deal. You've got all the ingredients here, but you haven't baked the cake yet. So the fact is, I don't want you to send this to me because it's not ready. So I need you to just keep working on the ingredients and stuff like that. So that was the analogy I used thousands of times with writers and everything like that, which was the way that I came to, to find what I considered to be a friendly way of saying, no, this isn't good yet, which is really what the message was. But that's so much nicer to talk about cakes than to say, wow, this is bad.
And it doesn't give false hope. I mean, I think that's sad to go home with this false hope that, oh, look, they requested my stuff. And then,
especially Johnny, when you consider every time in the first general session of a writing conference, they always ask, who's here for the first time?
Absolutely.
More than half the people who are there.
Yes.
Well, look, they need to know. I mean, really, people who are there for the first time, you want them to be encouraged and they need to learn stuff and everything. But they need to understand, look, this is a business. And just because you've got this cool novel idea does not mean somebody's going to buy it from you. Numerous times at conferences, I would have somebody when early on, we'd be introducing ourselves to people, one of the early sessions. And there was often somebody there who would show me something. And I could see right away, this isn't ready yet. And I wouldn't go into it because it's not a pitch. It's just, we're just kind of chatting and so, best of luck with that and everything like that. What do you think? Well, this might need some work. And it's funny because there's a type of writer who's coming the first time and they see themselves as being, they are the Ernest Hemingway of, they're the new, brilliant, right? And they see themselves that way. And I would see them just kind of ignore, oh, well, I'm going to talk to someone who's smarter than you, Chip, kind of thing internally. Okay, see ya, So are we anywhere close to the topic we were going to talk about, Brandy?
Yeah. We do have questions though.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
But before we ask those, there's one question that I really, really want to ask. And that is, have you noticed any pitfalls of bad behavior that experienced writers fall into where new writers don't?
Oh, good.
Stump the speaker.
I've stumped them.
I'm thinking two things. Universally, no. Individually, sure, there's a couple of things. One is, I think it's human nature for us to forget where we came from. And I do think that certain people forget. They go several times, they do a couple of books, and pretty soon they're not sharing where they used to sit down with a group of people and talk about ideas, suddenly then they're not really sharing with the newbies and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, you never, never forget where you came from. This is an interesting thing. I attended a conference a couple of weeks ago. I was not there as faculty. It was a spirituality conference. There were a couple of speakers I wanted to hear, so I went. It was at Warner Pacific College in Portland, Oregon. My very first writers conference happened at Warner Pacific College. I sat in the back row. I want to say it was the 80s, probably. I mean, before most of you were born. Uh, and it brought back the memory of being there and being a first timer. And I remember uh, sitting in the last row, which in the Presbyterian Church you call the doubter's pew. I raised in a Scottish family, and I knew the term. And yeah, and to not know anybody there. So I didn't even know really what to do. And so experienced people have to remember. And so I used to do general sessions where I would say, hey, if you're experienced and you've published, okay, these published people, they're not published people, you guys need to meet because they'll learn from you. And it's always good to stay in touch. Of course, the other big challenge that sometimes experienced writers will face is the Bible has a very clear precept, which is it has a lot of warnings about pride. And I do think that the Bible is right about that. Success changes us. It does. Success just changes us. It does. It just, I know so I worked at a really big agency, and then I was, publisher at Time Warner, and publisher at Hachette, and, I could probably count on one hand the authors who have had huge success, like life-changing, huge success, who were unchanged by it, because success just changes us. So people have really had big success and everything. I think success is tough to manage, I will say that there were a few. Eugene Peterson was one. Eugene was a pastor. He wrote a bunch of books. He wrote A Long Obedience in the Same Direction, which is a fabulous spirituality book. He, of course, is a guy who wrote The Message, the Bible in contemporary language. And Eugene, to the end of his life, he's wanted to talk to people about the Bible and what you thought a verse meant and everything. He was unchanged by success. Brennan was unchanged by success, but most people are not. Most people, they have success, and it changes them in very profound ways. Most of them not good. So sorry if that's
you have a good definition of success, and it's not coming to me really quick, though. I know we've talked about it on Writers Chat before, several different
I used to talk a lot about the difference between success is reaching your goals, and significance is making a difference in the lives of people.
Yes.
Over time. And I would always say that most of us who have a faith background, we're told to look for success, but really what we want is we really want to find significance. We really want to find. I'll say that again so that people get it. Success is reaching your goals, and that is success. I mean, it's a core success. You wanted to do something and you achieved it, so you're successful. But significance is making a difference in the lives of people over time, and I do believe that most of us, that's what we really want. We want to feel, we come to the end of our, so 65 and looking back, and it's like, I've had a lot of success, but what I really want, I want to look back and see that there were people who I helped who also found success in it. In a sense, I had a significant life. I made a difference in the lives of people.
Absolutely.
Good grief. That is, how could I want more than that? That to me, that's, so. Okay, so now I'll let you ask the questions. I'm sorry that
we've got several questions, so we may go over just a little bit if that's okay. We'll try to, because we've got like
I've got all the time you need, so we can go.
Okay, well, thank you, Brandy. I'm going to let you sort of then, if you want to start with David's. Do you have it up there?
Yeah. He asked, are there any agents who might do only a contract review without representing an author, like for an hourly or project rate?
I'm sorry. Is this in the chat so I can see it?
Yeah, it is. It's up a little bit. You may have to scroll up a little bit. David Young, Jung. I hope I pronounced your last name right, David.
I
It's at the 11:42 mark for me, probably 8:42.
A
yeah,
question
I'm
mark.
I'm not saying it, but
Yes, so he would like to know, are there any
oh, here
agents
it is.
who might do only
You might
contract
only a
review?
contract review without representing an author, like for an
Yes.
hourly or project, right? So there are editors that will do that. There are some, so they changed the rules. It used to be this was like you couldn't be an agent and you couldn't join the AALA, American Association of Literary Agents, if you did this by the hour. But they changed those rules a couple of years ago so that if you're at a conference and you want to basically hire out to do that kind of hourly consulting, that you can. So yes, the answer, David, is yes, there are some agents who will do that. And there's certainly freelance editors who will do that.
Great. Leslie asks, if you are unable to attend a conference, what are the chances of attaining an agent, editor, and publisher? She's heard of some who have never attended a conference and just sent queries.
Yeah, sure, that happens. And what you tend to get at conferences, writing conferences, publishing conferences, are a lot of, excuse me, I'm sorry, you get a lot of newbie agents, people who are just starting in it, fewer experienced people, although I know that there's always, there's agents who like to go to this stuff and they just enjoy it. They're like me. I always liked conferences. So even after, I had a full list of authors and was busy and stuff, I still liked it just because I like hanging out with authors, which I found to be an experience I couldn't replicate anywhere else. It wasn't the same. And so yes, it's able. Yes, there's a possibility of that. But it's harder because you're not face to face. So if you think about, do you want to you need remodeling done on your home? Would you rather it was you saw someone's work, maybe at a home show or something like that, versus just you read their website? The majority of people who I represented in my life were friends of other authors who I represented.
Yeah.
So I knew this person was working with them, and they said, so and so is an author at Simon & Schuster, and they really need to talk to an agent. Would you talk to them? Sure. And so the majority of people who I represented, it was because they were friends with somebody else I represented. And that was true over 25 years of agenting. And so I would say that as an answer to that, Leslie, is you'll probably, you might be able to try that, going to somebody who has an agent that you think has some of the skills that you need, and seeking an introduction. That's perfectly legit. I find that sending out blanket queries is far less effective because it just is because everybody's swamped. Everybody's swamped with
basically cold calling.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's say if that doesn't answer it well enough, ask another question. I promise we'll get to it.
We do have another question, but we'll save that for the after party if you're able to stay a little bit.
Okay.
All right. Johnny, do you want to discuss real briefly next week? Or Chip, did you want to say something else real quick?
Oh no, I finally discovered the questions in the chat. So do you want me to answer any of these, or do you want me to skip? Do you want me to skip these?
Do you want to answer Ben's question?
Well,
oh, I didn't see that one. Thank
Yeah.
Okay, I saw the one from
Yes.
Sophie. How do you recommend proceeding when one is
Yeah.
parting with the publisher?
I think that's the one we thought we'd talk about in the after party.
Oh,
So we
okay.
can
I'm
do-
sorry. Okay, I
No,
wasn't
that's
trying to
fine.
take it. Okay, so Ben,
Yeah,
if
we'll
the
do
relationship
Ben.
between writer and agent publisher
Mm.
should be conducted like a business, why will the agent publisher won't send an email or message in months or years, even to say no? I totally agree with you, Ben. As a matter of fact, this is like you. This is a pet peeve of mine. The notion of first of all, remember it's a relationship, and so like I've got some friends that I see and talk to on a regular basis, and we interact. And then I've got some friends who, we're friendly, but the relationship's a little different, and I hear from them less often, or we run into each other or something like that. And yeah, we're friendly when we see each other, but we don't necessarily seek to get together afterwards. So I would say don't expect that all your relationships with publishing people are going to be on a particular level. But it does drive me crazy that there are people in publishing who just they won't get in touch. I could never agent that way. The notion that the people I represented would never hear from me, I'd find that appalling. And so, I had first I had the blog and everything like that where I was interacting with people. But I also had a calendar where it was, and if I hadn't heard from somebody in a certain period of time, my tickler file popped up and warned me, you haven't talked to Michelle McKinney-Hammond in, 2 months kind of thing. So yeah, that does drive me crazy. And and in a sense, you are looking for a different, and I do think you have to say to them, I think you have to say to the agent or the editor or the publisher, I want a stronger relationship. Who I am, I need a stronger relationship. And Ben, remember that not everybody is like that. Somebody else on here, who have I not picked on? Rachel may feel perfectly fine not hearing from her agent for 6 months. I just, and that's okay because people are different and they want different things, everything. But I think you do have to say if you're looking for more. Was there?
That's it.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Do you have any parting words for writers in being a writer that publishing professionals will love to work with?
Yes. There's the industry is always growing and changing.
Mm.
And understanding that and demonstrating your understanding and would be important to people today, because it's not the 1990s anymore, and it's not the 2010s anymore. I will tell you, like right now, for example, since coming out of COVID changed it changed people in the country really significantly. So movie theaters are looking at closing, live theaters are looking at closing, a lot of venues like that, because there are certain people who just don't want to get together in crowds. Look at churches. It would have been unheard of for me 15 years ago to run into a bunch of Christian friends and none of them actually go to church. They're still Christians. They believe, they read the Bible. Maybe they're part of a small group or they hang out with Christian friends, but none of them attend church. Now, I know all sorts of people like that. They stopped going during COVID and they've never really gone back.
That's true.
So that's just demonstrating that some of the effects of COVID. So I will tell you something that I'm not seeing anybody write on enough, and it is this: the publicity stuff that people were doing before COVID, which was, it's always been changing. I remember when, having a broadcast fax was like cutting edge technology, but the people who were doing publicity before COVID, and they were reaching out to radio stations to try and get you on and everything like that, reaching out to podcasts to try and get you on. None of those strategies are working now. And that means, I think, that there's an entire group of marketing PR people, and I'm not just talking about in Christian circles, but in publishing at large, who don't effectively know how to do their jobs anymore, because everything they were doing before COVID has stopped working for them. Now they're still getting jobs, and but honestly, it's like nothing we're doing is working. And so I think that means there's gonna have to be a change in how we do that. So right now, publishers are looking for people who have some understanding of, obviously, you have to be able to write, and everybody's always looking for great writers. Something we forget sometimes. So when we talk about this, we talk about getting published and everything like that. But really, what everybody wants to find, they want to find the great book, just the book that just makes you, oh my gosh, I can't believe. And if you're in publishing long enough, you come across those sometimes. I still remember, and this is 20 years ago, I still remember there have been times in my career where I've been handed a manuscript. Clear back in the early 90s, which 35 years ago, I hate to tell you all of that now. I was given a manuscript from a publisher who said, "Hey, Chip, would you just read this and tell me what you think?" And I let it sit around for a few days, picked it up on a Saturday. And I read it, and I said to the publisher, this is a true story. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I called the publisher, and it had to be about 8 o'clock at night, maybe 9 o'clock at night here on the West Coast. And I said, "John, call this guy. He's in Indiana. He's 2 hours ahead of us, so it's late on a Saturday night. Call him, get him out of bed, get him to agree to a contract. We are going to sell 1 million copies of this book." He didn't call him, but we did do the book. That was Philip Gully's Front Porch Tales. And I could tell in the first 15 pages, oh my gosh, can this guy write? And of course, then he did all those harmony books and everything like that, and everything. It happened to me again. This is what happens when you get old.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Well, while you're looking, it's like, oh, Philip Gully. I've read almost all of his books. They are fabulous, the way he tells stories.
And he was totally unpublished at the time.
Yeah.
Okay, same thing happened to me when what I was actually looking for was the year that this came out, because I wanted to say it was about 20 years ago. And I was handed a manuscript and was said, "Okay, so this is a memoir, and what do you think?" And I read like the first 15 pages, and I called the publisher and I said, "Call this person, get her out of bed, because he has the gift and it is amazing." And the author's name was Haven Kimmel, and the book was A Girl Named Zippy. A girl named Zippy, growing up small in Indiana, and it had such fresh voice. For those of you who know me, I've always been a sucker for voice. Voice is one of those things that it's so rare. You often will find a well-told, well-crafted story and everything, but to find one with great voice, it's just super rare. And this one, it had such incredible voice. And then A Girl Named Zippy went on to win all kinds of awards, and she's had a career doing, Haven has had a career doing all kinds of books. So it does happen to me sometimes. And I would say that, so I'm giving way too long an answer to a simple question, which is, what should people be aware of? But being aware of how the industry is changing, being aware of what the trends are, being aware of who you are and what you want to write, and being aware that you'd really like to find not just a great story, but great voice in terms of being able to show this is what's unique about yourself. Those would be a couple of things that I think would be really important these days.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Well, next week we are going to do kind of a recap, I guess. So back in January, we talked about goals and all that good stuff that you always talk about in January and what we hope to accomplish this year. So we thought next week we would have a round table. So it'll be open mic. So everybody's just invited to come and share what you have learned in the last 6 months, if you actually made any goals and did anything to work towards them, how your goals might have changed. So it's just going to be a fun time just to share give updates on where we are in the year. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. We'll say goodbye right now and stop the recording. If you're watching the replay, we do invite you to join us any Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. Go around the globe, find your time zone. You can check out our Writers Chat Facebook members page and see all of the videos we've done. We're well over 300 now, which is so exciting. So we just thank you for being here. Chip, thank you too for being here. We just really, really appreciate it. And now once more, y'all can laugh at me because the record button
and
is
who's
right
here, please stay for the after party.
Yes,
We'll
please stay for the after party. And now it has gone again. And I looked when I came on, I said, okay, there is the share
Top right.
button.
Top right.
Yes, that's where it is. All right. Bye, everybody. See you next week on Writers Chat.
Thank you.